I'm honored to be the kind of master of ceremony of this conversation with Dr. Srikumar Rao. I would love to begin by just thanking all of you for being here, and for also to kind of frame a little bit of the Garrison Institute's Fellowship Program briefly, and then we'll kind of invite Dr. Rao to check in with us. So, as the director of the Garrison Institute Fellowship, we've been leading the charge of creating kind of an incubator for the next generation of compassionate and contemplative leaders. We have two cohorts who have gone through a 2-year process with us. We have 25 fellows, all of whom who are coming from all kinds of different fields and traditions, architecture, psychology, neuroscience, sound healing, and a full array of folks from early to mid-career, academic, non-academic, performing artist. The vision is to create a space where the future Dr. Rouse can essentially get support. That was my vision. In fact, let me paint the picture even clearer. I want you to think about those of you who have a consistent meditation practice, and those of you who've gone to either meditation retreats or have undergone meditation training yourself. I want you to envision who those teachers were. You know, I'm sure many of you have heard of Jack Kornfield, Mirabai Bush, John Kabat-Zinn, Tara Brach, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. You know, the reality is, though, is that we don't have a clear rite of passage or career path for the next Reverend Angels, the next Srikumar Raos, the next John Kabat-Zinns, unless you train under them and happen to be lucky enough to be graced by their generosity and are able to kind of teach with them, right? So the Institute is really trying to be a leader in creating an experience where we give the next generation of contemplative leaders the confidence that they need to take up space in the field in a significant way. With that being said, I want to begin to tell you a little bit about this conversation today with Dr. Rao. I want to name how the synchronicity of this experience. It was several months ago. Many of you might relate to this. I have a lot of books all over the place. So, you know, I turn my head and there's a book, you know, and so I'm always kind of in my house, in my office, there's always a text with a variety of genres. And one day I was going on a trip, and you know, I typically throw a book or two in my book bag before I go on a trip, especially taking a flight. And as I was leaving my office, I had picked one book already, or maybe I had picked two. Something stopped me, and I turned back, and I had one of Dr. Rao's books on my coffee table. It was white. It was a white cover, and the title was "Modern Wisdom, Ancient Roots: The Movers and Shakers Guide to Unstoppable Success." I was like, I felt bad for the books that I had already chosen. I was like, I don't know, you know, I'm sorry, you didn't make the cut. So I left one behind, and I added Dr. Rao's book. And I had such a wonderful time reading that text on the flight. And ironically enough, I received that. I had gotten his book through a shared colleague we have, Joe Polish. And so I was like, you know, I'm going to reach out to Dr. Rao. And I reached out, and he was so generous with his time and energy. And we thought that it would be great to gift the Garrison Institute community with his presence and with a dialogue around contemplative leadership and personal mastery. He's a walking master class. So I want to invite and welcome Dr. Srikumar Rao. Dr. Rao, how are you?
I am wonderful, Angel, and it's such a pleasure to be with the Garrison Institute. I've known of the Garrison Institute for a long time. In fact, many years ago, I actually conducted one of my retreats at the Garrison Institute. So it's a delight to be reconnected.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, yes. Welcome, welcome. So you and I have been in dialogue for some time now around our forum today. So I'll just share a few things and then invite you to just kind of begin to share, give folks a little bit of your background and just kind of your vision and spirit of your work. Work and our careers are such fundamental parts of our lives. And I think now more than ever, with the ways in which many of us, especially in the United States, but also I'm sure you can speak to this globally, there's a sense of burnout. There's a
Yep.
sense there's a sense that there's so much that we're holding, both as individuals, with our own personal responsibilities, with our families, with our communities, and then at the same time with what we're holding with work professionally, both the immediate responsibilities of executing on tasks, on strategic plans, on the day-to-day of our working lives. And then there's the what's happening in the world, uh, and so much is happening in the world. uh, Acceleration of change in technology, geopolitical polarization, climate change. There's just a lot. And then the blessings that are, also within those challenges. But I'm really curious about the legacy of your work in terms of really inviting us to think about our careers and our work lives as extensions of our spiritual path. Um, so I'm just so excited to start this dialogue with you, in particular because the Garrison Institute is so committed to harnessing the power of ancient wisdom traditions and scientific inquiry. And I think you bring a very particular angle around the business world, but also, our professional lives and how to thrive in that context. So just thank you for being here. And yeah, just tell us a little bit about your background and just your vision for your work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angel. I came to America as a doctoral student. I got my PhD in business from Columbia Business School. I joined the corporate world, and my career really took off like a rocket. And at the ripe age of 22, I was head of corporate research for Warner Communications, reporting directly to the president. So very, very heady days. I got burnt out by corporate politics. So I thought, I have a PhD, let me go into academia where there is no politics. I was very naive in those days. By the time I found out that politics is alive and well in the university environment, I'd already made the transition. And frankly, I got burnt out there too. All my colleagues who remained in the corporate world went on to great fortune and hierarchical position, and I was stuck as a university professor. And in the meantime, I had children, and there were financial and other pressures. And I was mourning my fate. I had such a brilliant career, such great prospects. I blew it all. I ruined my life. Oh, woe is me. Pity party one. All my life, I'd been doing a lot of reading, spiritual biography, mystical autobiography. They take me to a wonderful place, and I came back to the real world, and it sucked. So I remember thinking, if all of this is useful only if you're sitting quietly thinking peaceful thoughts, but not when you came to the hurly-burly, then it's useless. Somehow I knew that wasn't true. I knew that this was very valuable. I just hadn't figured out how to make use of it. So one day I got my bright idea, which is why don't I take the teachings of the world's greatest masters, strip them of religious, cultural, and other connotations, and adapt them so that they're acceptable to intelligent people in a post industrial society. And the thought of doing that made me come alive. So I created that course. It did well. I ran it again. It did better. I moved it to Columbia Business School in 1999, and it exploded. It was the only course at Columbia which was a university-wide draw. I had students from law school, business school, the School of International Public Affairs, journalism, teachers college, all over the place. And Columbia is a big international school, so students from other schools came on exchange, and they went back and said, "This is a great program. We got to have it." So I traveled. I taught it at Kellogg, at London Business School, at Berkeley, at Imperial College, and then I spun it out and took it private. But it got a tremendous amount of publicity in major media in between, and gradually I morphed into what I do now. I'm now an executive coach for the global clientele, and my niche is people who are very successful, but they also want to have an even greater impact on the world. They want to leave a dent in the universe, but they also have a spiritual drive, and they wish to bring that into every aspect of their life. So that's the sandbox in which I play. Now, in your introduction, you spoke about what's happening, in our personal life, in our professional lives, in the world outside. And I have a very simple take. The only thing you ever do in life, Angel, is you work on yourself. And a wonderful universe has given you a bunch of tools. Your relationships with your partner, with your children, with your in-laws, with your relatives, with your work colleagues, all of those are tools given to you. You use those tools to be as skillfully as you can. You want to be the best father you can, for example. But in the process of doing that, what you're really doing is working on yourself. Let's say you're an entrepreneur. You want to grow your business, you want to look after your employees, you want to be sure that each one is the best that they can be. In the process of doing that, what you're really doing is you're working on yourself. The only thing you ever do in life is you work on yourself. That's my whole philosophy. That's my take on what we are. So I don't make a distinction between personal life and professional life. You don't have a personal life and professional life. You've got one life.
Hmm.
So use everything that comes to you as a tool to work on yourself. And as I said, that's the only thing you do. Does that
Hmm.
make sense to you?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes total sense. And wanting to kind of go a little deeper around, you know, because it is a form of contemplative leadership in a way, uh,
Absolutely. Yes, it is.
leading your life in a contemplative way, both not divided, but both wherever you are, at work or at home or in the community.
I'd like to stop you a minute there, Angel, and make a very important point.
Mhm.
Very often, when we talk about leadership,
Mhm.
we talk about it in a very transactional way. And let me explain what I mean by that. You're a leader, you want to grow your people, you want them to be the best that they're capable of. But embedded in that, in most instances, is the notion that if you do the best that you are capable of, then you will meet your numbers. And if you meet your numbers, I meet my numbers, and good things happen to me.
Mm, mm, mm,
At a deep level, it is transactional.
mm,
Whereas my focus on leadership is you do the best you can, you want to grow your people simply so that they can be the best they are. And regardless of whether they remain in the company or go someplace else, you want them to prosper because when you do that, the world becomes a better place, and that's what you're in favor of.
mm. So it's a transformational approach.
Transactional, view it as for whatever reason, fate, kismet, karma, we are placed in this position, in juxtaposition. And in this, what can I do to help elevate that person? And
Mm,
whatever I can, I'll do it because that's my path in life, because that's what I do. And in the process of helping others to the extent that I can, I help myself, I grow.
mm,
And I never make the mistake of thinking, I am doing this. I am helping the person grow. No, it is coming through me, not from me, not by me. And to the extent that anything I share helps another person, that is their gift to me, not my gift to them.
Hmm. Hmm. So you said it's coming through me.
Mhm.
You said it's coming through me, and I'm assuming that that coming through me is kind of a reflection and reference to a relationship to some kind of higher power or some kind of higher force. Or you mentioned universe earlier. I'm really curious about, as you've been doing this for decades, and thinking about personal mastery and contemplative leadership. Um, just how do you develop the relationship to surrender to your relationship, to being able to listen to that, to what's coming through?
That's an excellent question, Angel. Thank you for asking that. Now, as I mentioned, I'm an executive coach with a global clientele, and I've had multiple people of every wisdom tradition become my clients or take my courses. They all felt that they understood their tradition better as a result of working with me. Now,
Mm,
if you're a person of faith, and I say, hey, don't imagine that you did it. Jesus did it, or Allah did it, or Krishna did it, or Buddha did it. It all works. And if you are atheistic slash agnostic, the universe did it. Now, if you look at your life, Angel, an incredible number of fortuitous, serendipitous things had to have happened in order to have brought you where you are. Your parents had to have met at the right time. They had to have, out of the many billions of sperm released in each ejaculation, one particular one had to mate with a particular egg and, come together. And then you had the circumstances. All of that had to go into making Angel, right?
mhm,
So you can look upon it, if you will, as a cosmic lottery, except that nothing is by chance in this. It seems to be by chance, but it really isn't. There is some underlying intelligence. And if you don't feel comfortable with having a deity, let's just say it's the universe. The universe is orchestrating all of this. So if the universe is orchestrating all of this, it's a damn good idea for you to align with the universe. The problems that we have in our life is that we have an acute sense of doership. I did this. I worked hard. I studied. I got good grades. I went to a good college. That's why I got a job. And there I worked hard, and therefore I achieved it.
mm,
And there's too much of the feeling of I built into it. Whereas it's much better if you simply say, hey, there is this force, whatever you call it. If you're a person of faith, you can call it by the faith figure who inspires you. If not, it's the universe. It's going its merry predestined way, and you happen to be along for the ride. So be grateful that you're for the ride, but don't think that you did it, because the moment you say I did it, you go on an ego trip. And
mm,
that ego trip will prevent you from realizing your true nature. And frankly, it'll steal a lot of happiness from your life.
mm, mm. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to, if I may, ask a harder question.
Sure.
I'm thinking about some of your clients,
Mhm.
who some of them have maybe a spiritual background or a contemplative practice, uh, that they lean on to navigate their role as, let's say, an executive, or their role as a community leader.
Mhm.
And and, and I know you said earlier that, you know it's more advantageous to orient towards, let's say, building a team, with the sole purpose of just ensuring that everyone maximizes their full potential,
Mhm.
as opposed to thinking about it from a transactional lens where it's ensuring that everyone is as productive as possible to achieve certain results.
Mhm.
There be revenue, or, whatever organizational metrics, OKRs there are. We have a lot of people who are listening and who are here live, who are in organizations, who are in families and have certain goals and have certain some desires to meet certain milestones, and also have this hunger for exercising contemplative leadership, and also kind of cultivating their own personal mastery. So my hard question is this, Dr. Rao, is how do you work with someone who really has some hard um, responsibilities in terms of meeting certain numbers, let's say, or meeting certain, um, how do because it sounds great, like, yes, I'm going to surrender to allowing the universe to work through me so that I can, figure out how to, make this team, bring a lot of money, or make this organization, the Garrison Institute, generate enough power to continue to be sustainable. So yeah, I want to get deeper into that. Like,
Absolutely. So, Angel, let me tell you something that happened when I was teaching at London Business School, and you tell me whether or not it captures the spirit of the question you just asked me, okay? This was a guy who was a very senior sales executive at a Fortune 25 company. He was responsible for sales in Europe, Middle East, Asia, Australia, a big chunk of the world outside of North America. He said, Professor Rao, all you say is very fine, but I have numbers to meet. And this particular quarter, we're not going to meet the numbers. And if I go back and tell my boss, hey, boss, we're not going to meet the numbers, but Dr. Rao says it's okay, he's not going to be very thrilled about it. And the entire class burst out laughing because the same thought was in their heads at the same time. Does it capture the spirit of what you're saying, Angel?
yes, 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 yes.
So I told him, yes, you're absolutely right. By the way, if you go to your boss and say, I'm not going to meet the numbers, but it doesn't matter because Dr. Rao says you, that is not a career enhancing move. Stuff, you had numbers to meet, you didn't meet your numbers, as a result of which stuff could happen, up to and including your involuntary severance from your position. You could get fired.
Mhm.
If that happens, when that happens, we'll deal with it. But in the meantime, you can deal with it as you normally would have been, which is, what are the reasons I failed? What are the excuses? These are the unusual circumstances. You can go into an emotional downturn and figure out who else you could blame and all the rest of the stuff that happens in politics. So you can simply accept that I had numbers to meet. I didn't meet it. What do I do now? I said, yeah, that makes sense. So he went offsite with his team, and then he went up to his boss and said, "Hey, boss, we're not going to meet our numbers. I don't know what the shortfall is, but this is the order of magnitude of the shortfall, and this is what I propose to do about it." And he had some revenue enhancement measures, some cost containment measures, and some let's restructure and see what happens actions. And those were very unusual business circumstances. So his boss looked at that and said, fine, go do it. And what could have become a major derailment became a minor bump in the road. Here is something for you to recognize, Angel. We always live our lives the following way. I set a goal for myself. I tried very hard. I achieved my goal. Yay, life is wonderful. Or I set a goal for myself. I tried very hard to achieve it. I failed. Life sucks. We live a life oscillating on a sinusoidal curve between elation and despair. And we spend too much time at the despair end of the spectrum. It's a lousy way to live.
Mm.
What you should do is set a goal for yourself by all means. Set a stretch goal for yourself. Sometimes, if you're working in a company, that goal is assigned to you rather than something you set. But once the goal has been set, forget about the goal. The primary importance of the goal is it establishes the direction in which you travel. Once that direction has been established, forget about the goal. Instead, pour all of your emotional energy into what are the activities that you have to undertake in order to meet your goal. As you do this, two things happen. One, you start enjoying what you're doing. When you're obsessed about the goal, the destination, you miss the journey. The destination is a mirage. You go there, you tarry a few minutes, you're off someplace else. The journey is with you always. The journey is the only thing you have. And secondly, not only do you enjoy the journey, the second thing that happens is the probability you'll get to the destination you want increases dramatically. Because the mistake we all make is thinking that the benefit of setting a goal and trying our level best to achieve the goal is achieving the goal. No. The benefit of setting a goal and trying our level best to achieve the goal is the learning and growth that happen in us and to us as we try our level best to achieve the goal. If we actually achieve the goal, that's a bonus. Be incredibly grateful. If you don't achieve the goal, the learning and growth have already happened, so you're ahead of the game. There's a wonderful Zen saying that encapsulates this, Angel. The purpose of washing dishes is not to get them clean. The purpose of washing dishes is to wash the dishes. The byproduct is they become clean. That's really profound.
My wife might disagree, but yes, I hear you.
It's really profound. The purpose of washing dishes is not to get them clean. The purpose of washing dishes is to wash the dishes. Byproduct is they become clean. That's worth pondering over. So in answer to your question, that is exactly how to tackle it.
Yeah. And
you find that you are completely at peace. Let me give you an example. If you look at the entire history of mankind, you'd be hard put to find more weighty stuff resting on the shoulders of one man than that of Dwight David Eisenhower on the eve of D-Day, June 5th, 1944. Tens of thousands of people were ready to get into planes and jump out of them. Hundreds of boats of all sizes were taking tens of thousands of people across the channel on an invasion. In a very real sense, the fate of the world depended upon the decisions of this one man. Can you picture that? So he should be very, very, very troubled, right? So much resting on him. On the contrary, he went to bed and he slept well. And afterwards, he reflected on that. He said, I had the best meteorologists give me the best weather forecast they could. I had my best generals in charge of different parts of the entire operation, and there was nothing more I could do, so I went to sleep. That's how you deal with the problem.
So I know you said there's a sense of peace. There's a sense of peace. There's a sense of surrender. Here, kind of thinking about our audience and allowing all of us to slow down to sense into like that this kind of form of contemplative leadership that is not transactional is really creating a sense of spaciousness to be able to find a sense of peace with the journey.
Yes.
Leading in an organization or leading a family or leading a community. So thank you for that. I have a lot of clarity there. And so I want to kind of
add to that sense of clarity, Angel. People talk about Abraham Lincoln as being a great orator. And when they talk about Abraham Lincoln being a great orator, typically they're thinking about the Gettysburg Address, 7 years ago, and so on. But an equally powerful speech he gave was his second inaugural, where he said, with malice towards none, with charity for all, I will do the right as God gives me to see the right. Notice, he didn't say, I will do the right. He said, I will do the right as God gives me to see the right. What God gives me to see the right tomorrow may be different from what God gives me to see the right today. And in that case, tomorrow I will do what he gives me to see the right tomorrow. But at any given time, I will do the right as God gives me to see the right. I will be true to my intention.
Mm,
And when you're embedded in that, you go and do the very best you can, and whatever happens, happens.
mm. Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about that is pretty much kind of the power of ancient wisdom traditions is being able to equip us with the wherewithal to deal with whatever happens, happens.
Exactly.
So I want to kind of move into personal mastery, um, and personal mastery and creativity, and really kind of inviting you to share a little bit about like how does one cultivate personal mastery, and what's the role of creativity in that?
The two are linked, Angel, because I believe that everybody is creative. It's not that some people are creative and some people are not. You just have to unleash the creativity that's in you. And one of the ways to do that is to care deeply about whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Inamori, who was the creator of the Kyocera Corporation, used to say when a researcher is so involved in what he is working on that, like sweat, it comes out and evaporates, and then it falls back as rain, and then he will find his problem solved.
Mm,
So you care deeply about what you're doing, and as you do that, you find that you are naturally creative. And if you add to it the notion of gratitude for this powerful force that's always present, that has caused you to get this idea, then you find that you're even more productive and even more creative. And personal mastery comes about when you are constantly contemplating your role in the universe. Your role is to be an instrument of the universe and working to help other people reach higher levels of consciousness. That is the key to it.
mm,
Somebody asked Swami Vivekananda. He was in America in the late part of the 19th century, the early part, the late part of the 19th century. And somebody asked him, Swamiji, what is the best form of political and economic organization? Is it communism? Is it monarchy? Is it capitalism? Is it democracy? What is the best form? And he thought for a while and said, it really doesn't matter. What matters is what is the level of consciousness of the people who are on top.
mm,
There have been enlightened monarchs and there have been tyrants. Democracy can bring you suboptimal outcomes, as we're seeing right now in many parts of the world. What matters is what is the level of consciousness of the people who are on top. And that is where I've got to tell you, Angel, you and the Garrison Institute have a leading role to play because, in your own small way, you're helping raise the level of consciousness of the people who are in your ambit.
mm,
And
mm.
we need that now more than ever in the world.
No, thank you for that. And yeah, I think part of what comes up for me as listening to your response around personal mastery in particular and creativity as well is I think sometimes part of the challenge is our focus on what's outside of us, other people, the external challenges. And what I'm getting from you is this profound invitation to really sense into your own internal intentions. Just really relax into just sensing into like what brings you alive. You know, one of the things you said earlier in your opening remarks was it brought you alive. You know, asking the question around spirituality and business and success, like just brought you alive. And I think oftentimes when we look outside, when we look at others, when we measure ourselves based on someone else's values and rubric, that just becomes a lot harder. It becomes a lot harder to be creative in that kind of space and way of thinking. I'm curious about you use this idea of quantum leap. Speaking of consciousness, what do you mean by, inviting us to make a quantum leap in our lives? And what's a strategy that you be, you know,
You know,
yeah.
we have this notion that, progress happens in increments. You climb the ladder of success one rung at a time, and it requires a lot of effort, and it is slow and painful. And I'm inviting you to throw that thinking out,
Mm,
that you can go up several rungs. You can leapfrog several rungs, and you can do it again, and you can do it again. The way you do that, Angel, is you can't do it by working harder. Working harder will actually set you back. You can't do this by working smarter. You can't do it by managing your time better. The only way you're going to pull this off is to think differently. Now, the notion of thinking differently is not new to you. You've been exposed to it many times. How many times have you been told that you should see the glass as half full rather than half empty? Or that every problem is an opportunity in disguise?
hmm
So, thinking differently is not new. You embrace the idea. But despite that, you've not had much success in your life because you try to think differently by trying to think differently. It doesn't work. What I do in my course, in my coaching, is I have a different take on it. You think differently when you examine the mental models you hold that get you to think in a particular manner. And when you identify those mental models and make changes in them or replace them with new ones, then all of a sudden you find that you don't have to try to think differently. You think differently as a consequence of using different models to live your life in. And then all of a sudden, mysteriously, locked doors open, serendipitous opportunities happen, things just open up. Like the
Yeah.
fact that we're having this conversation came about because Joe Polish gave you a copy of my book, and we're both part of the Genius Network. And we didn't know it until I didn't know it till you reached out to me, and that's how it happened.
hmm
You can invite this serendipity in your life. You can have a life that's full of miracles, where in fact you depend on miracles without even consciously realizing it.
mm
And it can happen.
mm
That's a big chunk
mm.
of what my coaching is about. Now you're going to ask me how.
How? Now give me just to invite the audience to.
Here is what happens,
Yeah.
Angel.
Yeah.
There is a time. Look, the vast majority of people believe that the universe is neither friendly nor unfriendly. It's indifferent. It doesn't know I exist and could care less. Okay. But Einstein was the person who said the most important question you will ever ask yourself is the universe friendly? Let me repeat that. Einstein said the most important question you will ever ask yourself is the universe friendly?
Mm.
There are some people who believe the universe is unfriendly. The sole purpose of the universe is to frustrate you. They're few in numbers. The vast overwhelming majority, as I said before, believe the universe is neither friendly nor unfriendly. It's indifferent. It doesn't know that I exist and could care less. Here I am going around doing my thing. There's the universe going around doing its thing. Sometimes it seems to work for me. Sometimes it seems to work against me, but essentially it's a random process.
Mm.
What if that wasn't true? What if the universe was friendly? The universe was aware of your existence and well disposed towards you. Well, if the universe was friendly, why does it give me stuff I don't want? I want to get promoted at work and I got a pink slip. Well, what if the universe didn't give you what you wanted, but the universe gave you exactly what you needed for your learning and growth? Like you're a small child, you want a cup of ice cream, but the universe through your parents gives you fruits and vegetables. You don't want fruits and vegetables. You want a tub of ice cream, but the universe gives you fruits and vegetables. It isn't until you have a much higher level of maturity and wisdom that you can say, thank God I got fruits and vegetables, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if the universe was like that?
Mm.
Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist for you to figure out that regardless of whether the universe is friendly or not, if you believed the universe was friendly, your experience of life would be a whole lot better, right?
Mm.
It's a superior mental model. But just because you recognize that something is a superior mental model doesn't necessarily mean you can adopt it. So if you want to adopt the friendly universe model, you have to work at it. And how do you do that? Look around at your life and see how many indications there are that it is a friendly universe. I'll give you an instance. So last week I had to go to the supermarket. My wife wanted me to pick up something, and a couple of items, I picked them up, and then I went to there was only one checkout counter open, and there was a long line. And in front of me, there was a lady who had one of these overflowing shopping baskets, or shopping carts. And I looked at her and said, God, it's going to take me forever to get out of here. And even as I was thinking that, she looked at me and smiled and said, oh, you only have a couple of items. Why don't you go ahead of me? So I did. So I went ahead of her. And then somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I'm opening up counter number 2. Why don't you come there? So I went to counter number 2 and got out straight through. Now, such things happen to us all the time. And what do? We glad and then we forget it. Don't forget it. Make a note of it. Recognize that the universe has just demonstrated that it is friendly. Write it down and look for such instances in your life, and there will be dozens every day. Note those down. Like you and I are talking today, at the moment you called me up because Joe Polish gave you the book, I felt an instant kinship with you, and we spoke and we hit it off, and that's why we're having this conversation. It's a friendly universe. Tomorrow, I may do a live program with the Garrison Institute. It's a friendly universe. People are going to come up and say, hey, Angel, that was a dynamite program. It's a friendly universe. You suffered an unfortunate loss last week, but your father is now done with the suffering part of it, and he lasted much longer than expected. It's a friendly universe.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize, acknowledge each one of these things and start looking out for them. And when you start looking out for them and noting them in your journal, very soon you'll find there are so many instances that you reach your personal tipping point. And so if there are so many instances that the universe is really looking out for me, is it possible? Is it just possible that perhaps it's a friendly universe after all?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you tip over into living in a friendly universe.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
why Einstein said the most important question you will ever ask yourself is the universe friendly?
Yes.
And all you have to do is keep looking out for instances that the universe is friendly.
Mm. That's powerful, Dr. Rao. I appreciate that response, and that question really captures this idea of a that's a quantum leap in and of itself to orient towards the universe.
And when you do that, all kinds of things happen.
Yeah.
Because here is something. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who was so angry, agitated, that just being in that person's presence set you on edge?
Of course.
Okay. So recognize what's happening. We're always sending out vibrations at all times. And this person's vibrations were so strong that it grabbed you by the neck and pulled you into their downward vortex of anger, hate, whatever it is. Your job is to be so firmly anchored in your place of calm and serenity that you grab them by their neck and pull them into your vortex of peace and serenity.
Mm.
And if you haven't done that, it's simply an indication to you that you've got more work to do until you're firmly anchored in your space of calm and serenity.
Mm. Yeah. No, I'll take that.
That
Mm.
is where you want to be all the time. And the reason I mention that is when you are vibrating at that frequency, people want to be around you. They sense something. And that's when they'll come up and do all kinds of things to open themselves up. They want to be part of your environment. And
Yeah.
doors open mysteriously, all kinds of serendipitous things happen.
Yes.
That's how you make quantum leaps. You don't try to make a quantum leap, they just happen.
Hmm.
Happen because of the vibrations that you're sending out.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I am kind of locating myself in this conversation and respecting time and also um, feeling the community curious to engage in this dialogue. So in a moment, I'll invite um, anyone, folks that are here live, to begin to ask any questions, share any thoughts. Before we do that, I have one more question,
Yeah.
and then it's around, like, yes, the you mentioned that the universe gives you what you need, and sometimes what you need is, a nice dose of suffering or a decent dose of challenge, acute challenge. And so on the one hand, I appreciate that, and I can see that. Um, However, I'm also curious about both. One, what's your advice around inviting folks to surrender more to seeing our challenges and the difficulty in our lives as opportunities, as openings, as an extension of a friendly universe. But more importantly, stress. And you mentioned how to eradicate stress from our lives. Like, any thoughts around that, around, reframing stress and reframing our resistance to settling in to our experience, especially when it's very difficult?
Okay. So there are two parts to that question. First part, we are wrong about why we think we have stress in our life. I've asked thousands of persons in 6 continents this question, and they tell me I have stress in my life because there's a range of reasons they come up with, and I boil them into categories. Financial, I don't have enough for some reason or the other. Money is an issue. Relationships, typically with partner or spouse, but could be with in-laws, colleagues, work bosses, and so on. Children, children are bundles of joy sent to bring meaning to a life, but they do the darndest things. They drop out of school. They fall in love with the most inappropriate people. Health, your career, and people say these are the reasons I have stress in my life. Not true. There's only one reason you have stress in your life, and that is you expect the universe to unfold in a particular manner, and the universe pays no attention to what you want and unfolds the way it unfolds. So you want to get promoted and get raises in your salary, and you get fired. And you resist it and you resent it. And in that resistance and resentment, you create the stress in your life. that is the only reason you have stress in your life. Because you want the universe to unfold in a particular manner, and the universe pays no attention to you.
Mm.
You have to learn to accept what the universe gives you, and not just accept it, but embrace it. Now, you haven't raised this question, Angel, but I get it all the time. Dr. Rao, there are some things that are so horrific that I can't ever think of themselves as a gift. Death of a small child, for example, serious illness. On a global scale, it can be things like, war, the Holocaust, the partition of India, where millions upon millions of people died. So how do you deal with that? As I say, don't try to kid yourself that this is a good thing. You can't do that. You can't kid yourself on that. But you can say, given my present level of understanding in evolution, I cannot conceive of these happenings as anything but a horrific tragedy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it up in cellophane and put it on the top shelf and say, maybe someday I'll understand it. Right now, I cannot. But I will not let my life be defined by this tragedy.
Mm.
And I don't have to tell you that a great many wonderful things have happened as a result of personal tragedy. Organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, for example, or that group that was formed to ban the use of landmines, won the Nobel Peace Prize a few years ago. All of those came as a result of personal tragedy. Somebody felt that, that was the impetus that moved them. So whatever your tragedy is, see what you can do to use that as a tool to make things better in some way. And do not let your life be defined by a tragedy.
Mm.
That is definitely something you can do. But as you move along in this, you will find that things change, your internal perspective changes, and you can mourn horrific loss, but at the same time be at peace even as you do that. That is something that you have to discover for yourself, but it will happen.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Indeed. Yeah, as we transition to some questions from the audience, I want to say that I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for the sensible, the sensitive, and the insightful knowledge that you share. It's matter of fact, it's direct, and it's grounding, and just sending so much energy your way, and really appreciating you in this moment. So I know there's some questions that are coming up in the chat.
Okay.
We'll
Go
we'll
ahead.
we'll ask you some of those in a moment. I also want to invite some voices in the room. So if you ask the question in the chat and you want to voice it, we can do that now. I'll ask some of the questions that are coming up in the chat as well. But I really want to create an opportunity to bring some audience participation and to hear your voices. So you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question or are ready to talk and share. You can raise your hand in the raise hand feature on Zoom. Um, yeah, don't be shy. Don't be shy. But we really want to hear anyone who's ready to share, and then I'll hold this space for a little while, and then I'll ask some of the questions that are coming up in the chat. So as you're deciding whether you want to jump in or not, I'm going to ask a question from someone in the audience. Dr. Rao, what is the first step we should take when a mental model kicks in, which is unhelpful?
The first step is to recognize that this is a mental model. The problem is not that we have mental models, Angel. The problem is that we don't recognize that we have mental models. We think this is the way the world works. But this is not the way the world works. This is our model of the way the world works. And we invest so much into it that it becomes a silo that's almost impossible to break out of. So the first important step is to recognize this is not the way things are. This is our model of the way things are. I'll give you an example. I was speaking before the Global Leadership Conference of the Entrepreneurs Association, Entrepreneurs Organization. And I'd barely got 5 minutes into my speech when several people who were in the first row got up and left. And, they tried to be silent about it, but because it was a closely packed room, it created quite a disturbance. I said, gee, I really blew it for whatever reason. They don't like it. I went on with my talk. And later that evening, we had a cocktail reception. And, while I was at the buffet table, some of these people were next to me. And I said, hey, what happened? What did I say that you found so objectionable that you had to get up and walk away? And they said, no, Professor Rao, you got it all wrong. What happened is that we are the learning chairs for our respective chapters of the EO, and we were going to all of the talks to find out whether or not we wanted to invite the person to speak at our chapter. And we decided immediately that we wanted you to speak at our chapter, so there was no need for us to say. We went to catch some of the other talks. I thought what actually was something completely different. We never see the world as it is. We see it through the models that we have. So when you recognize you have a dysfunctional model, something bothers you, examine and find out what that model is and how you replace it with something else. This is not an easy process, but it's not difficult once you recognize what it is that you're doing. And I'm going to make a blanket statement to you, Angel. Anytime you have a situation in your life that you find troublesome and it persists, not some of the time, not most of the time, every time you have a situation in life that you find unpleasant and it persists, you are using one or more mental models that are not serving you well.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment you make appropriate changes in those models, poof, that situation will vanish just like that.
So this is another question. Often our work is with people who are in survival mode and who don't have the capacity to reevaluate their own mental models or to move with compassion and curiosity themselves. How do we protect our own state of mind and ability to live in acceptance and in kindness, and in the kindness we intend to bring in intense environments?
That was actually I actually made reference to that. Remember what I said earlier when I asked you if you'd ever been in the presence of someone who was so angry, agitated that it took you outside, it took you into that person's downward vortex? It's the same thing to do with someone who's in a survival mode, who's desperate, who's living in a world of scarcity. They're all vibrating, and those vibrations are grabbing you. Your job is, first of all, to recognize the vibrations that they are emitting. Decide consciously that this is their state of being, not something that you accept, and to remain rooted in your place of calmness and serenity. And the way to do that actually is to work on your mental chatter. Mental chatter is an internal monologue that you have going on in your head all the time. Begins when you get up in the morning, is with you throughout the day, and is sometimes so loud that it prevents you from going to sleep. That incessant train of thought. So once you start recognizing that, and you can actually start guiding it, And this is a very important part of all of the courses I teach. It's also a very important part of my personal coaching. Once you do that, you'll find that it's not that easy for somebody else's models or chatter to drag you into those uncomfortable places. And as you practice observing your mental chatter and detaching from it, you find that it's much easier for you to resist the downward influences of people around you. But you have to be constantly vigilant, and the effort is needed to do it. But the benefits, oh, they're incredible. So here it is. Uh, let's assume that I'm putting out a new edition of Death of a Salesman. Okay? I'm
Yeah.
shooting a new movie, and I hire you to be Willy Loman, the star of Death of a Salesman. So Willy Loman was a very successful person, but then gradually, his career falls apart. He gets divorced, he tries to commit suicide, and he doesn't succeed, and all kinds of horrible things happen. Now you're acting Willy Loman, right? So you want to
Yeah.
get into the skin of Willy Loman and portray it effectively, and you try to do that. But even as you're doing that, in the back of your mind is the knowledge that I'm not really Willy Loman. I'm acting the part of Willy Loman. And if I do a really good job, perhaps there's an Oscar in it for me. Okay? That's what I mean. If you identify with the actor, you're gold. If you identify with the character, you're screwed. You think that you are a particular body mind intellect complex. I'm doing this, I'm in Vietnam. All
Yeah.
of that is a role that you're playing. That's not who you really are. Who you really are is pure awareness masquerading as a role. Your life situation is a soap opera. So you go through the soap opera, you act your part, you do the very best you can. But the whole objective of human existence is to get out of the soap opera and realize who you really are. Buddha nature shining through. That's what I meant earlier when I was speaking to Angel and saying the only thing you ever do in life is you work on yourself. And the work on yourself is to get you to recognize that your essence is Buddha nature. You are the Tathagata. You just have to recognize that you are there and drop all the things that are not you. It's the role that you are playing, so play it with gusto, but know that you are not the role. You're the
Yeah.
person playing that role. And
Mm.
by the way, the entire culture that we live in is against this. It all tells you that you're the role. It's your job to fight against this conditioning that is always being thrust upon us and
Yeah.
recognize that you are the actor, not the character. But once you do that, you'll find that anything can happen to the character and you look at it and enjoy it, but you're really not affected. But you will find actually that if you go on the journey mindfully, things start happening automatically. You'll find that you're less attracted to junk food. You'll find that you eat less. You find that intoxicants no longer attract you as once they used to. A lot of these changes start happening organically and effortlessly as you live your life of awareness.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Wanted to there's a couple. We have quite the international community. Our brother
Yes, I
from
noticed
Vietnam.
people from Vietnam and so on.
We have a fellow from Japan. One of our fellows, Dr. Yuki Moses from Japan, and the institute also has Garrison International based in Europe. So we do have an international community, and always grateful to have folks jump on live from different. We have a colleague from Germany. We have a colleague from Germany who asked a question, and I want to make sure that she gets some support. Um, she was talking about she has a goal of reforming teacher training in Germany,
Mhm.
and it's such a bad moment for German teachers. They're mentally stressed in school, and she asks, "What do I say to teachers who keep telling me that they don't have time to deal with it? They feel so sick. They feel so trapped in a system that's, unfortunately dysfunctional, but they have no energy to free themselves from it. Like, what is she, what does this person say?"
Yeah, that's one of the difficult questions because you can't tell them, hey, listen, it's all your mental problem, but it really is. So rather than tell them anything, she can suggest, do you think it would help if? Now, one very powerful technique, by the way, is convert everything into a game. Let me tell you the background for this. I have taught my course at many of the top business schools in the world, and many of my students, MBAs, graduated and they went to work in the financial services industry, investment banks, private equity funds, venture capital. Those are not warm, fuzzy places. So the number of toxic boss stories that I've heard are, I could write a book about them. I remember one person in particular, she was saying, Dr. Rao, you don't know how terrible my situation is. Her boss was a gazillionaire and he has completely profane, no inhibitions. Every time he got angry with someone, he'd draw himself to his full hair, thrust his face into the face of the person that he was angry at, and his face would become red. And he would start shouting, and bits of spit would fly and land wherever. And they said, Dr. Rao, you don't know how bad it is. I can't stand it anymore. The moment my bonus rests, I'm out of here. And I told her, yeah, that's fine. You can leave. But you've invested a lot of time in this company and getting to where you are, and you're throwing all that away. He says, but what can I do? I am not going to put up this anymore. So I told her a story. When my kids were younger, I took them to Disney World, and we were waiting for one of the attractions, and there was a long line. It was hot, and there was a guy right behind us who had a small child, and the small child was going around and bothering people in the line. He touched them with sticky fingers, so they didn't like being touched with sticky fingers. So look at the father, and the father would be embarrassed and hold the child tight, and the child would start crying, and he'd let him go, and then he'd go start touching people with his sticky fingers. So just an unpleasant situation. And then suddenly the mother appeared. And with the gift that mothers have, she saw behind his behavior and said, he's hungry. And she produced foods. And in less than 10 minutes, there was a remarkable transformation in the kid from being a pest. He was the life and soul of the party, making friends with everyone and joking around. And remarkable transformation that happened in less than 10 minutes. So I suggested to my student that every time her boss got into one of his screaming matches, he was just a kid throwing a tantrum. She was totally unconvinced. But a few days after that, she did something which displeased him, so went into his routine and he thrust his face into her face and drew himself to his full high, and his face got red and started screaming, and bits of spit started flying. And all of a sudden, he seemed so much like a kid throwing a tantrum that she couldn't help it. She laughed. So he was taken by surprise. And I don't know what she said, but she realized that at that instance, there was a switch turned in her head. And she no longer saw her boss as an ogre. but simply as an overgrown kid throwing a tantrum. And the funny thing was, the moment there was a switch turned in her head, the relationship changed. He behaved exactly as he did with everyone else, but he never screamed at her again. And 6 months later, she quit to go someplace else, and the situation resolved itself. So the point I'm trying to make is when somebody is in a situation like that, you make a mental transition inside your head, and the situation will resolve itself. At the very least, you can make it a game. You know, somebody is saying something, I can either be worn out or I can recognize that a friendly universe is giving me a situation. What can I do? One thing that I frequently advise someone who has a toxic boss is, can you do something to get my boss to smile? And if you can, you win. And if you can't, he wins. But now you've converted something into a game, and people enjoy playing games. So for all of the teachers who are burnt out, see what is burning them out, see if they can convert it into a game. See, can I maintain one day where I am upbeat simply because I choose to be upbeat? And particularly for people like that, it's important to think each day is your life in miniature. You're born when you get up in the morning, you die when you go to bed at night. This day is all I have. What can I do to determine that this is going to be a splendid day, regardless of all the crap that comes down my table? When crap comes down my table, I'll simply look at it and say, am I going to let you steal my perfect day from me? Ask it as if it was a person. And when you do that, it's a game you're playing, yeah, but it's a very powerful game. And you'll notice bit by bit that things that used to wear you down before no longer wear you down. You have to
Yeah.
put it, Angel.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that one, Dr. Rao. I wanted to, there's two final questions.
Mhm.
Very quickly, any thoughts around how you teach this to children and to teens, these tools?
Oh, children are especially good because they don't have to unlearn the stuff that we adults have to unlearn. So you have to look out for the time when your children are receptive to what you're saying, and you have to be sensitive to that because a lot of the time you tell them things and they're completely tuned out. And because you're a parent, you have parent baggage, so anything you say must automatically be wrong. But there are times when they're receptive, and when they're receptive, you say, "Hey, this is something you should consider." It'll sink through. A very powerful tactic is to get the children to tell you where you're going wrong. Like, say, for example, this is a very powerful technique. You explain to your child the concept of mental chatter and say, you know, mental chatter is the stuff that's going on in your head and takes you away from wherever you are. And you say, you know, I'm suffering from mental chatter and I want you to help me. And every time you catch me where I'm not there, because I'm involved in my mental chatter, why don't you point it out to me? And if you're right, I'll give you $1. And now all of a sudden, your kid not only knows about mental chatter, he's looking for you to, when you're carried away by mental chatter. And you'll be surprised at how many dollars you lose. But trust me, it's some of the best expenses you'll ever make, expenditure you'll ever make. But you've also taught your kid about mental chatter. So there's all kinds of ways, creative ways in which you can frame all of the things that I teach into exercises that you can play with your children. And in fact, when I run my course, I have a separate session on that. And it's also part of what I help my clients deal with when we're in a coaching relationship. But be creative. You can come up with all kinds of ways, and you'll find that if you can understand, if you can get your child to understand that they don't live in a real world, they live in a construct, and this construct was created with a mental chatter and mental models, you will have given them a gift which will serve them their entire life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Rao. We have one final question that we're entertaining, and I leave this one last just because of the delicate nature of it. And as someone myself who has lost someone who I hold dear in my heart, I think grief is a wonderful way to end in terms of um, orienting towards the universe as a friendly place. A colleague in the chat mentioned that, a friend of theirs had a young child, an 11-year-old child, die, and um, the question she asked is, she said, "How might I one day understand things that today I cannot?" You know, my friend's 11-year-old child passed away. Is there a reason why I don't understand? So if someone is in grief in the community. Any thoughts there?
Certainly. It all depends on how you view life and death, Angel. Now, understand one thing. People always say, I grieve for my father, I grieve for the child who died. You never grieve for the person who passed away. You always grieve for yourself. These are the things that could have happened but won't. These are the things that did happen and they shouldn't have, and all the would have, should have, could haves come in. You're grieving for yourself, not for the other person. Now, there is a model that we come into human existence because there is something that is needed for us to accomplish. And the moment that is accomplished, we leave. And whether that's accomplished when you are at the ripe age of 95, or whether you're an infant when it happens, it happens. So therefore, if someone passes on, they finished whatever it was they needed to do, and they're now on for the next phase of their journey. And you acknowledge it and are grateful that they were there for the time they were, and you wish them well for their onward journey. And if you think about it and you can embed yourself in that, then you will learn to celebrate the life rather than mourn the loss.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Really appreciate you, Dr. Rao there.
The life, don't mourn the loss. Because whatever they have to finish, whatever they had to accomplish, they accomplished, and then they left. So honor that and wish them well in whatever part of their life journey they're on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that one, Dr. Rao. As we come to a close, I want to thank you, Dr. Rao, for the wisdom that you brought today. I want to thank everyone here who's live and participated. I want to thank anybody who's watching the recording of this conversation. And I want to thank the Garrison Institute for really welcoming Dr. Rao. Again, I want to also let the community know that Dr. Rao will be um, teaching at the Institute in person at some point in the next within the next year for sure. So look out for any in-person opportunity to come be with him at the Institute. We'll be in conversation with him around possibly offering more virtual opportunities to engage him, so that those of you who can't come in person can engage as well. So just be on the lookout for Dr. Rao as a faculty member.
Angel, if I can mention it, if they go to my website, and my website is www.therawinstitute.com, and there's a big button called Join Now. And if they click on that and register, they'll get my blog and they'll get information about my programs. And, they just might want to do it if they like what they heard today.
Yeah, so please visit therawinstitute.com and join Dr. Rao's newsletter and all the wonderful offerings that he has there. Please. In regards to the Garrison Institute more broadly, we're here. We're here hosting virtual and in-person retreats. As Melinda mentioned, she just came from one in person. I'll be part of hosting an experience in a couple of weeks called the Healing Centered Education Summit. The theme being hope and healing in practice with some wonderful faculty. So I put that in the chat. Check that out. Please join us. We'll have 3 days of wonderful conversation. And then lastly, just kind of channeling my colleague Steve Varley. I want to close with an appeal. I think that organizations like the Garrison Institute need to be well resourced and supported. And I want to just invite you all to not just consider donating. I think from a transactional perspective, sure, but really channeling what Dr. Rao's inviting us to do. I want you all to join us in inviting the possibility that the universe is so friendly that the Garrison Institute can be sustainable and survive and thrive another 30, 40 years. How's that?
300 or 400 years, Angel.
You know what? Why don't we do 1,000, Dr. Rao?
Yeah, that's more like it.
So yeah, everybody, thank you so much. Here doing good work. May you all may the universe continue to be gentle and friendly to you, or may you continue to perceive that. Um, May that be so. Thank you, Dr. Rao. You all take good care.
Angel.
A deep bow to everyone who joined us. Thank you to the team at the Garrison Institute that made this possible. Be well.